Sedent for this meeting of the Financial Resources Scrutiny Forum held on the 27th of April 2023. I can see that we have present Councillors Buchanan, Councillor Dewar, is also present, as is Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Gowland? No. Councillor Keat? No. I have apologies for Councillor Lockhart. I can see that we have present Councillor Mars. I have apologies for Councillor McAdams, and I can see that we also have present Councillor Nugent. We also have a number of officers present today, and with that, I'll pass you back to the Chair to commence today's business. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth Ann. Okay, going into item number 1, and that's the declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. All right. We'll move on to item number 2, and that's the minutes of the previous meeting from pages 3 to 6. Can we agree those minutes, please?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you, Julia. So moving on to item number 3A, and that's the Capital Budget Monitoring 2022 to 23, the General Fund Capital Programme from pages 7 to 26. And if I can hand over to Lorraine O'Hagan, please, and Derek Craig. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Agenda item 3 then really starts on page 7, and section 4 is the main crux of the report. So section 4.2 explains the total programme of 78.396 million, and that reflects an adjustment to the programme approved by the Executive Committee on the 29th of March, which I'll talk you through in a second. The adjustment overall was £180,000 and is additional funding for an existing project. Due to the timing of the project spend, we don't anticipate any spend in the current year, 22-23, and the project funding will slip into 23-24. So there was actually no impact on the bottom line position for the programme for the year. In terms of the outturn for the year, that's in section 4.5. So we reported previously that estimates across resources suggested an outturn of 73 million, and that's a net underspend across the resources of £5.3 million against the budget of 78.396. The majority of the variance is in relation to the timing of spend, and it results in the budget being required in 2023-24 rather than the financial year 22-23. Excuse me. We're currently working on finalising the position for the old financial year, and we'll bring that back to the Scrutiny Forum for your information once the exercise is concluded, and that will be after the June Executive Committee. A list of the main projects that make up the predicted 5.3 million underspend is included in Appendix E, and I'll go through them in a few minutes. Section 4.8 notes this period 12 position, so that's to the end of February. Programme spend and funding for the programme is summarised in Appendix D, and we can see the programme of 78.396. So against that, we had budgeted spend of 46 million and actual spend of 45.6 million. So we had an underspend at that point of 400,000. That's mainly due to the timing of spend on the Roads Investment Programme, the City Deal project at Greenhills Road, both within Community Enterprise Resources, and those were less than anticipated at that stage in the financial year. Those are offset by good progress on the Oracle Fusion project within Finance and Corporate Resources. Actual funding received to the end of February is 70.47 million, and that's noted in section 4.10. If I can take you to the appendices then. The first appendix is Appendix A, and that's on page 10. And that shows you the exception that we mentioned earlier in terms of the addition to the programme for Shatler Row allotments. We've got additional funding from the Community and Enterprise Resources Revenue Budget, and also from the Food Strategy Support Fund. So we're adding that to the budget they already have, and we'll slip that into the next financial year, as I mentioned earlier. Appendix B on page 11 shows you the proposed adjustments totalling nil because we brought it in and then we've slipped it. So we've still got a programme of 78.396 million. And at the bottom of that page, you can see the programme across the resources. Appendix C then on page 12 gives you more detail across the individual services of the resources, and again shows you down at the bottom right hand corner the full budget for the year of 78.476, expenditure to date, or the estimate to date, sorry, of 46.008, and then the actual spend at the end of February of 45.607. Appendix D of your report then shows you the funding position. So as at the end of February, we had funding received of 45.607, and at the bottom you can see that the total funding, spend of 45.607 and total funding received to the end of February of 70.470 million. So we had the vast majority of funding already in place at that point in the year. Appendix E then shows you the projects where we have a projected underspend in 2022-23, which we will carry forward into the next financial year. And those are there for your information, along with the expected completion date in the new financial year. And that takes us on to the build programme. So I'll hand over to Derek. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Chair. We're moving to page 16 now, the build executive summary for general capital, and the period 12 report shows that there are no projects behind programme. On page 17, we're moving to the non-build executive summary, and once again there's also no projects reported in this period behind programme. And moving forward to page 19, the roads executive summary also has no projects behind programme. And that's the operational report, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions with regards to that report? Okay, no questions. Can we agree that report, please? Thank you, Julia. Okay, moving on to item 3B, and that's the Capital Budget Monitoring 2022 to 2023 Housing Capital Programme on pages 27 to 34. And if I can hand back to you, Lorraine.
Thank you. So on page 27 then, section 4, again, is the main part of the report. So the revised housing capital programme for the year is 66.361 million, and there's been no changes to the budget since we last reported to the forum. The programme funding for the year also totals 66.3, and there's a bit of detail in Appendix A to the report, which we'll get to in a few seconds. 4.3 then looks at the 22-23 outturn position for housing and technical resources housing capital programme. And it suggests that there is an underspend of £8 million within the programme by the end of the financial year. That's an increase on the 3.9 million on the underspend we reported to the forum last time round. As we reported previously, we have a number of factors that are colluding to result in that position, and that includes operatives from property services being diverted away from the capital investment programme to tackle urgent flooding damage. We had delays in external fabric projects due to suspected presence of bats. We had reduced owner uptake for external works, and we had a higher than normal volume of no access for legislative works that we were trying to carry out. In section 4.4, we also note that the underspend has now been impacted because of an expected delay to the completion of the Kirk Street programme in Straven as a new build development. The development was due to be handed over to the council in March, but was delayed due to circumstances that were out with the council's control. So they are now looking to complete in April, and that means there's an amount of 2.9 million that will fall into the new financial year rather than the old one. Just to note again, funding for these projects that are underspent at the end of the year will carry forward into the new financial year to allow them to complete. Section 4.6 looks at the period 12 position again to the 24th of February. The budget at that point was 50.039 and we actually spent 46.245 million. So we had an underspend of 3.794, and that mainly reflects the issues that I've detailed previously. As at the 24th of February, we had funding of 46.245 million, and that's noted in section 4.7. If I can take you across then to the appendices. Appendix A details the expenditure budget and the funding for the housing programme. So again, you can see the figure on the right-hand side, 46.245 is the spend, and 46.245 is the funding that we've received to the 24th of February. And again, that takes us on to the build appendices. So if Derek can pick them up, please.
Sorry, Chair, we're moving now to page 31 of the report, and that's an executive summary of the Housing Capital Programme, which shows 3 projects behind programme to that point in period 12. Over the page, on page 32, there's an explanation for each one, and I'll run through them individually. The first one is Blair, Beth and Spittal Estate. It was an external fabric project that's been running for a number of years. The project is behind schedule now because we've discovered that there is further deterioration of the balcony works, and from our initial assessment back in 2018-19, so we are going to have to reprice those and have further owner consultation for those owner-occupied blocks. That's delayed that project. The next one is the loft and cavity wall insulation. It's behind programme as a result of basically getting into people's houses to be able to do the work that's been identified. And the last one, as Lorraine's already covered, is the new build acquisition. We're buying that from Clyde Valley Property Group, and that's behind programme due to their builders' work not being complete to the stage where we anticipated it to be at the end of March, and that has now been delayed further into May. So that's the report, Chair.
That's great. Thanks very much. Does anybody have any questions with that report? Okay, can we agree that report, please?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I had a conferral moment.
No problem at all, Julia. Okay, if we can move on to item number 4, and that's the revenue budget monitoring 2022 to 2023 and the probable outturn, pages 35 to 40. If we can hand over to Lorraine again, please, to take us through the report.
Thank you, Chair. Section 4 then of this report again kicks off the main elements of the paper. We are reporting there the 2022-23 General Services probable outturn, and you'll note and remember that we discussed this last time. We had a probable outturn underspend of 4.696 million, and we had previously approved transfers of 17.4 million and proposed transfers of 17.195. And we also proposed that we transfer the underspend of 4696 to reserves. Section 4.2 goes on to explain that we got approval for that at Executive Committee, so that leaves us in a break-even position for the current financial year. So the appendices to this report provide you with the position before and after transfers to reserves. And I'll talk through those in a second or two. Section 5 then goes on to look at the General Services monitoring position as at the 24th of February. So as at that point in time, after transfers to reserves, we had an underspend of 1.875 million. It's noted that in that period 12 position for social work resources, we have a break even. That includes an underspend on the delegated budget for adults and older people of £165,000, which is offset by a net overspend in the other non-delegated elements of social work resources. If the underspend on the delegated budget is removed from the core council position, then the revised core council position as at period 12 is an underspend of £1.710 million. Section 6 goes on to look at the housing revenue account position at the end of February. Appendix 3 shows the break-even position against the phased budget on the HRA at that point in time, and that takes account of an element of the underspend in financing charges as we had forecast as part of the probable outturn exercise. So we will continue to monitor that as we get towards the end of the year. And just in section 6.2, it's just explaining that the break-even position was what we declared up probable. If I can take you over to the appendices then, Appendix 1 shows the position for the general fund before transfers to reserves. So you can see at the bottom greyed out box, we had a figure of 39.311 million of an underspend, and we have 11.959 of an underspend as at the end of February. And if I then take you over to Appendix 2, you can see the greyed out box after the transfers is then showing a break-even position, and 1.875 of an underspend as at the end of February. Appendix 3 on page 40 shows you the position on the housing revenue account there, and the bottom shows you there we have a break-even position in the variance column, and that's taking account of the overspend in the net controllable expenditure line, and it actually says an over-recovery there in terms of financing charges. Apologies, that should say an underspend of 755, and that allows us to come in break-even at the end of February as well. And that's all for that report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay, can we agree that report, please? Thank you, Julia. Moving on to item number 5. That's the Revenue Budget Monitoring 2022 to 2023. The detailed resource analysis, pages 41 to 116. And Lorraine, if you could guide us through that report, please.
Thank you. So this is the normal variance explanation report, which is a bit more detail than the high-level summary report that I've just taken you through. So we really start, in essence, on page 43 with Community and Enterprise Resources. And you can see the greyed out box shows that after transfers to reserves, we have an underspend of £7,000 as the forecast for the year. And as at the end of February, on the right-hand corner, we have an overspend of 24,000. Over the page, we have the detailed narrative explanations. They run for Community and Enterprise Resources from page 44 to page 56, and there are about half a dozen new variances for your information, and those are underlined to highlight them for you. So I'm happy to take any questions on any of those. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Is there any questions? Okay, with no questions. Okay, if you take this through to the next part.
Okay. Education then is the next resource, and that starts on page, if I can find it, 63. So again, we have the summary position for the resource. The greyed out box shows a break-even position for education after £1.5 million of transfers to reserves. On the right-hand side, you can see 1.384 million of transfers to reserves as at the end of February, and again, arriving at a break-even position. In terms of the variance explanations, they start on page 64 and run through page 67, and I think there's only one new variance that's come up in this last period, which is in relation to contract speech therapy on page 66. If anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Is there any questions? No? Okay. Take us to the next part, please, Lorraine. Thank you.
The next resource is Finance and Corporate Resources, and that starts on page 73. So again, the greyed out box shows the position for Finance and Corporate Resources with no transfers to reserves highlighted in the probable outturn, and therefore no transfers to reserves highlighted in the actual position at the end of February. But both the probable outturn and the period 12 position are showing a break-even for the resource. The narrative explanations start on page 74 and run through to page 78. And there's 5 new variance explanations that are underlined for members' information. And again, if there's any questions, I'm happy to pick them up. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Lorraine. Is there any questions for that part? Okay, no questions. We can move on to the next part, Lorraine. Thank you.
Housing and Technical Resources then starts on page 85. Housing and Technical Resources is showing an overspend at probable outturn of 342,000, and at the end of February they're showing a position of 230,000 overspent, and that position is part of the overall probable outturn position for the council. The variance explanations start on page 86 and run through to page 90. There's about half a dozen new variances to highlight to members, and those are underlined for members' information. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Is there any questions with that part? No? Okay. If we move on to the next part, thank you.
The next service area then is the housing revenue account, and that's on page 97 with the variance explanations highlighted through to page 98. As we already talked through the housing revenue account, it's showing a break-even position in terms of its probable outturn and also in terms of period 12. And I think there's only one new variance highlighted for members' information, and that's on page 98. And again, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Is there any questions? Okay, no questions. On to the next part, please.
And the last resource then is social work resources, and that's on page 103. Again, the greyed out box shows the position of zero variance as part of the probable outturn, and that's after transfers to reserves of 5.635 as agreed at the Executive Committee. In terms of the position at the end of February, we have a break-even position again, and that takes account of £4.518 million worth of a transfer to reserves. The variance explanations for the resource start on page 104 and run through to page 110. And there's half a dozen new variances there, again, since last period, and again, they are highlighted in underline for members' information. And again, Chair, happy to take any questions. Thank you.
And again, on the last part there, does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. Can we agree the whole of that report? Thank you very much, Julia. Okay, moving on to item number 6. That's any urgent business, which I don't think we have. So I'd like to thank all members for coming today, and I'd like to declare the meeting closed. Thank you.